Welcome to another episode of The Horrific Podcast. We're two musicians who used to play in a band together and share a passion for scary movies. Each week we pick a different horror movie and dissect it to figure out what it was trying to accomplish, how well it did, and maybe even some larger truths about why people watch horror movies in the first place. If you haven't seen the movie we're talking about, then don't worry. The first half of the episode will be pretty high level and spoiler free, and then we'll play a warning before we start talking about any major plot twists in the ending. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome to Season 5.
Season 5? Wait. Say it again.
Welcome to Season 5.
I'm excited to be here, Daniel.
As am I, Bryce.
I'm working on my new podcast voice.
I like it.
Thank you.
We should be a lot more formal. Give it that...
Indubitably.
That nice NPR, calm, large vocabulary, reassuring.
And now we're going to listen to a group called Superorganism. It's about a group of people who are millennials, and they make funny sounds, but they write catchy tunes.
Why don't you listen with me?
Oh, God.
I feel like we are the polar opposite of NPR as far as what we are interested in and talk about on this show. But
I know.
I'm going to start off by saying something that might surprise you.
Oh.
I found The Blob, the 1988 version, to be extremely refreshing.
It was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought the same thing.
I felt like...
I have a theory why, but yeah.
Well, I feel like we spent so much of last season on like the really kind of subtle haunting type horror and like creepy things, but it wasn't as much like in your face.
Yeah.
And this movie was in your face.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I love that about it.
Yeah, I was confused because I was like initially starting it was like, okay, let's get this freaking thing over with. Just thinking, because neither one of us had seen The Blob before.
Correct, yeah. And
also, that was the other thing that we did different for this season, was instead of, normally be like, okay, well, we should watch the original, and no. We're like, let's do the 1988 version.
Yeah. And I feel like we've kind of been on a streak. We did the Halloween 2 and like a lot of those 80s sequels, and then we did Killer Clowns, and so it's like, let's stay in the vein. Let's see how this one compares.
Keep going.
Yeah, and it definitely...
And also... Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and also because, like, with Killer Clowns, it talked about being influenced by The Blob.
Yes.
And so it's like, okay, well, let's see the influences there.
Yeah.
And there were.
Yeah, for sure. A lot. Yeah. But it was a little deceptive because it started off as kind of like an 80s teen comedy. Yeah. And I was like, oh no, is this going to be like the Jessica Biel Texas Chainsaw all over again? But it really stepped it up into a totally different kind of movie that I enjoyed. So before we give too much more away, let's introduce it and start things off right.
Let's do it.
In 1988, TriStar Pictures released a remake of The Blob, which was originally a horror film released in 1958. The remake was written and directed by Chuck Russell and chronicles the adventures of two teenagers who try to warn their town of an amorphous monster made of acid that is on a murderous rampage. As is typically the case, no one takes them seriously until it's too late, and then it's a race against the clock to try and find out a way to stop the dangerous creature. Though it has a strong cult following, The Blob made less than half its original budget at the box office. It can currently be rented for streaming on Amazon Prime Video.
Very nice.
Keeping it to the point.
Very, very nice. So I got a couple facts.
Yeah, I was going to assume there were quite a few out there because this movie is very popular.
The problem that I ran into with the facts is a lot were for like the original. But I can still kind of use some of them, so I'm going to just kind of pick them out. So, it says here that the film budget was $19 million for the 1988 version, and it said $9 million actually went to visual effects.
Oh wow, yeah.
which I thought
I believe that.
kind of strange. The exterior movie shots were shot in Louisiana, like just a smaller town. The town was called, I'm going to say Abbeville, Abbeville. It's laid out almost exactly like Arbeville, Colorado, which is where the movie's supposed to take place.
Oh, interesting.
They filmed it actually in that town because for some reason there was snow.
Oh, in Colorado?
Sorry. Yeah, I was trying to be sarcastic. They did it because the town was covered in snow in Colorado, which is what it was based on, so they couldn't continue. But yet again, here's one of my kind of spoilers. They actually took they kind of did what Alfred Hitchcock was known to do, and they basically, by like getting to action fast and taking out characters that you wouldn't expect to be taken out.
Yeah, for sure.
That was kind of like his calling card kind of thing. So there's a town. So this is kind of like, I got this from the 1958 version, but it still works for this. It's just kind of interesting. There's a Blob Fest, a town in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania. Has a 3-day annual festival celebrating everything Blob related. Basically, it also has like a recreation of like the teens rushing from the theater scene at an actual movie theater, but it's just like all the Blob movie references, which I think is kind of crazy.
Yeah. In
itself, just because it's like, wow, this city really likes the Blob.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, yeah, and for a movie that made less than $10 million at the box office, it wasn't like it was this huge cultural phenomenon, you know?
Yeah. So that was pretty interesting. Here's another thing that's not part of this one, but I ran across it multiple times. Steve McQueen, the famous Steve McQueen, he was in the original, and he was supposed to be playing a teenager, but he was 28 years old at the time, and like
still had that mustache.
Yeah, it was bad. But anyway, so supposedly the Blob is inspired by true events. In 1950, I think it was the Philadelphia Inquirer ran a story claiming that a flying saucer had dissolved and into the atmosphere and all this stuff, and it said a lot of witnesses confirmed that a gooey substance was found in the spot where the object had crashed.
Okay.
So, I guess that's where it supposedly was yeah. Okay, so the 1988 remake has connections to Stephen King's universe. The Blob is co-written by Frank Darabont, director of The Mist, The Green Mile, and Shawshank Redemption. The Blob actually contains several allusions to The Stand, including the primary antagonist's name is Brian Flagg, which was played by Kevin Dillon. The old man at the beginning of the film is referred to as Can Man, and the lead, Shawnee Smith, went on to play a part in the Stand miniseries. So it's anyway, so there's just a lot of connections to him. There were plans initially to do a sequel to the 1988 version of the Blob, but like because of like the box office and not being good at all, it was not gonna happen, basically, is what they said. And also, this movie has something kind of rare in it where it kills a kid. A lot of horror movies, if you noticed, they stray away from that. Not all, but
that's one thing we talked about with the 2018 Halloween, how striking that was. Yeah,
and so this was another one where it kills a kid, which is kind of strange. So those were the facts that I heard or read about the Blob.
Nice. If it makes you feel any better, Steve McQueen didn't have a mustache. I was totally thinking of Tom Selleck. So
yeah, it's okay. I'm sure Steve McQueen had a mustache.
I actually, while you were reading the rest of your facts, looked up pictures of him online, and I didn't find a single one with a mustache. So Yeah, I'm just that dumb.
You're not dumb.
Well, I feel like he's dumb because he probably should have had a mustache.
Well, I mean, for the love of God, yeah. Here's one. I found one.
Okay.
Nope, that's Jack Nicholson.
Damn it.
Yeah, we were way wrong. No, I mean this is
the famously clean-shaven Steve McQueen.
But he was 28 in 1950.
Yeah.
So in the 70s, when those stashes were in,
yeah, he was too old for
prime age for it. So don't. Yeah, I guarantee you, he's had a mustache in his life.
All right. So we normally kind of after the facts talk about what were the people who made the movie trying to do and how well did they do it. And in some ways, this one reminded me a lot of Killer Clowns, except with like less humor and a higher budget, where the strength of the movie was definitely the special effects. But this one also had kind of an interesting story develop towards the end as well. Like it wasn't just as simple as clowns run wild around the town while the kids try to find out how to beat them. There was a little bit more to it than that. And even though it started off with some corny humor in the beginning, I really feel like this movie took itself seriously as a horror movie, and used the special effects and the visuals to kind of drive that point home.
Well, it kind of had to also with if they used 9 million special effects. But yeah, I think it definitely, like you were saying, like it started off, and I was sitting there just thinking, like, God, like I don't know, is this going to be like kind of you remember The Power? Yeah, how it had like those kind of high school scenes, and it didn't necessarily make sense. And I was sitting there kind of thinking that it's like it's gonna kind of be like that. But yeah, it definitely stepped up. It's like once it got to the action, it was there to stay for the rest of the movie.
Yeah, and like the music and camera work didn't really stand out to me. I think the acting was passable for the most part. But again, the thing that was really worth paying attention to was just the special effects and the setup for the scenes with the blob. And, like Killer Clowns, they used a lot of real stuff. I think they call it like practical effects, where it's not animation or computer generated stuff. It's just like real makeup and costumes. And I felt like they did a really good job of that. And the way that they just designed the monster was especially fitting for that type of effect. And so it seemed like what the movie was trying to do was something that it was capable of pulling off. So it wasn't like corny where you're like, oh, that looks so stupid that I can't take it seriously. It kind of stayed within the realm of what it was capable of attaining, which I thought was kind of cool for something this ambitious, and something in 1988.
Yeah, and it's definitely interesting for the fact that it's literally a blob, like it's just I don't know. So like there's not very many limitations to it. It can squeeze between under doors or in pipe. So you always have that kind of constant fear, and also like the harm that it did to people wasn't just like, oh, they disappeared. It was like they were melting. So you had that intense aspect. And it was pretty graphic violence.
But, and I also felt like the story had a little more complexity. It definitely wasn't like Haunting of Hill House complex, but it was a little less straightforward than even say like the original Haunting, I thought. And one of my takeaways was that the people who made this movie did not like authority structures. So like cops or the government or the medical industry or priests. It was just like any societal institution was portrayed extremely poorly in this movie. And so I think they definitely were making a point of that with the way that they did the story.
Absolutely, yeah.
But overall I enjoyed it. I thought that it was, I wouldn't say that I was particularly scared by it, but I appreciated the horror elements, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and okay, so this is technically a remake, but as far as the story goes, like I'm one who appreciates like a unique story, and this is definitely like as unique as it can get. So there were. The dialogue was relatively rough in spots. but it didn't kill the film for me. I was able. I'm glad. I probably would have stopped if it wasn't for the podcast and had a totally different opinion of the movie than I do.
Yeah.
After
like the first 20 minutes or so would have turned you off enough that you wouldn't have continued. Yeah, I'm in the same boat. And there were some pretty laughable moments that weren't supposed to be. But we'll get into that for sure after the spoiler warning.
Yeah.
But who would you say would like this movie?
This is the 80s. It's not technically a slasher, but it's the same fans of that, I think, could watch this and enjoy. If you like the Friday the 13th, then this is right up your alley, or like the sleepaway camp kind of horrors,
Yeah. It definitely wasn't like super psychological or mysterious, but it was just a good, fun horror movie with a lot of legitimately good, scary scenes.
Yeah. I don't understand the whole town being obsessed with it, but it was definitely enjoyable.
Yeah. They're maybe a little more interested in it than we would be, but...
Yeah. We probably just, that was probably one of our listeners that we just lost, the mayor of that town. Screw those guys.
Yeah, just when he was about to start another town holiday for just our podcast.
Oh, I know. Yeah, now he's going to go dislike our YouTube page.
Niche interests are his thing. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and play the spoiler warning, because I want to talk more about the story and also a lot of the specific scenes.
Yeah.
Cool.
Warning, warning, warning. Spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. This is your warning. Warning, warning, warning. Spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. This is your warning. If it's not obvious enough, warning, spoilers.
All right, we're back. We're buzzing right through this episode. Season 5 is off to a hot start.
Coming fast.
Yeah. So, what did you love or hate about this movie?
So, I enjoyed some of the humor to it. One of the things I think that I didn't enjoy was some of the dialogue that was going on, and I don't have too many examples. One I guess I have is when Brian is leaving the hospital, he's kind of had enough. He's like, I'm getting out of here, and Paul is also acting like a tough guy.
Yeah.
And was like, where are you gonna be? And Brian's response was something like, if you need me, you'll know where to find me. And it's like, no, no one does. The last thing we knew, you were out in the middle of the woods, trying to ramp a bridge with your motorcycle, you hunk. Anyway, so it's just that. It didn't make sense, I guess. Yeah. I was just like, okay, well, I gotta write that down. But
it's like perennial mysterious outsider claims that you should magically know where he'll be at any given time.
Yeah, you'll know where to find me. So I liked how once it got to the action, it got to the action.
Yeah.
And also you're following Paul thinking he's the main character.
Yes.
And then literally next thing you know, I think he's the second person to die, I think, in the movie. And it's like, oh my God, okay, you got my attention.
Yes.
That note, here's a tip for all you future filmmakers. Use that, because I think that death is what kept me interested throughout the whole movie, because that no one's safe, at that point. So, I think that special effects were just some of, my favorite things of it.
Yeah. So the things I hated about the movie was a lot of the dialogue and some of the story was just dumb.
Yeah.
There was that subplot about the police not liking Brian. And so they're at the hospital and Paul gets melted by this giant ball of acidic alien gack. And the police walk in and see that and they're like, yeah, obviously Brian did this. What?
Right. Yeah.
How would Brian even have done that? He's just a dumb kid. And then just I felt like that was an example of how they were constantly creating conflict with societal structures that just for no reason. So that was a little odd to me. Well,
there was also the quote where he got arrested, early on in the movie, and he's sitting in the police station, and the deputy, who's just like an obvious dick, makes 3 jokes in a row, basically like joking about like, you're gonna be here for a long time, just all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so Brian responds back with one smart ass comment, and the deputy yells at him, "You think this is a joke?" And it's like, you literally just said 3 jokes.
Yeah.
And he responded, and it was just like, okay, calm down, like it's not a big deal. But yeah, that's just an example of the whole police.
Yeah.
Yeah. But.
Yeah. Yeah, and things I loved were, like you, the visuals. I thought it was really perfect for what it was trying to do, and any of the scenes where the blob is attacking or interacting with people were just great.
Yeah.
And another thing I liked about that was just that no matter what they do, the blob just keeps getting bigger and bigger. Mm-hmm. And I felt like it was kind of the opposite of what we didn't like about Bird Box, where in Bird Box it felt like anytime there was conflict or adversity, then they just got past it and then it never came back.
Yeah.
Whereas in the blob, it's like you've got this enemy and it's just getting bigger and bigger and more intense and harder to get away from. And there's never really any sense of resolution or a dip in that urgency until the very end when they finally find a way to defeat it. So from a horror perspective, it was a lot more engaging, I thought. And I like the way that they sort of developed the creature and the danger of it as it went on.
Yeah, because I mean that was also the sense of dread, knowing that it's just getting bigger and bigger, and there's, you kind of know, the viewer kind of knows that the cold is what will stop it, just from the whole freezer scene. But still, it's like, oh god, this is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. So were there particular scenes other than the pharmacy one? Because that one I've got to go back to. So Paul and Scott are hanging out in the beginning, and there's still been no real feel of like what this movie's going to be yet, and they're in the pharmacy, and Scott is buying money because he's got a date later and he wants to buy some condoms from the pharmacist, and he's standing there buying them, and Paul's just like hanging out in the store, and then the priest comes in and he's talking to Scott about how he hasn't seen him in church lately or whatever, and then the pharmacist comes back and he's like, regular or ribbed? Scott says he wants the ribbed ones.
Oh, right.
And then he's like, oh yeah, no, that's for my friend over there, Father.
Yeah.
He's a bad kid. I'm trying to just encourage him to be responsible about what he's doing. And so the pharmacist and the priest both are looking at Paul, who is over there completely innocently looking around in the store. And then later that night, Paul goes to pick up his date, and as he opens the door, he sees her dad at the table, and it's the pharmacist, and he's just like, ribbed.
Yeah. That was fantastic.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. I thought that was. But there were a lot of scenes like that in the beginning that really didn't play into the overarching story at all. They were just there to kind of be funny. And that I think you were onto something when you talked about how once the action starts, it doesn't stop again. Mm-hmm. And that scene where Paul dies when so it's like after the homeless guy has been admitted to the hospital, Paul goes to get his girlfriend a drink, and then he walks by and sees the homeless guy on a stretcher convulsing, and then it's like his whole body's swelling, and then they go get the doctor and come back, and he seems to be normal, but then they pull the covers back and the whole bottom half of the man is gone, like something just exploded out. And then Paul runs into the doctor's office and is calling for help, and you see like acid dripping down from the ceiling, and then the blob falls down on him and just like melts him. Yeah. And that was so intense and so completely 100% the opposite of everything that the movie had been up until that point. Right. And then it just stayed on that track the entire rest of the movie. And so it went from like 0 to 60 and became a very different type of movie very quickly. Mm-hmm. And that almost makes me give them a pass for all the corny stuff in the beginning, because that really set it up for that acceleration of like the intensity.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an 80s movie, which has, a lot of, not all 80s movies had cheese in it, but this definitely did. But, like you're saying, I think it got a little bit of a pass. Another scene that I enjoyed, I definitely enjoyed because I was cool with the Blob killing was the scene with Scott.
Yes.
The kid who blamed the condoms on his friend. You know, he's having basically kind of roofing a girl to get her, you know.
Well, he had like he had a date rape kit in his trunk.
Yeah, in his trunk.
Yeah, terrible person.
Also, like, okay, like that's kind of cool to have a bar in your trunk, but yet again, you have alcohol in a car and you're driving. That's not cool. But anyway, so like he's kind of date raping her almost.
Yes, he's trying
fixing to.
Yeah.
And like it's almost making me like sick because it's just like, God dang it, like you hope that it gets there in time, you know. And you kind of think too of like at the time, like what's gonna happen, and is this being played off like a joke, like every other scene that he's been in? Like, am I gonna feel like I need to go take a shower because this is just dirty to watch? Yeah. And then because it's, you know, and next thing you know, the Blob made its way into the car when Scott was in the trunk getting more drinks, and he goes to stick his hand in the girl's shirt, and it's the Blob, and he dies from that. And it's like, okay, that's a death I'm okay with. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
But
it was kind of like in Killer Clowns, where they killed everybody I wanted them to, and you know, I felt similarly with the Blob, except for Paul because he was cool. But
some poetic justice there. Yeah. But, so another scene is when they're in the diner. Kind of the whole diner scene after the Blob had come out. So Brian and Meg are in the diner. Brian's eating a sandwich, and it goes into the kitchen, and the kitchen like sink is kind of clogged, and so a guy's trying to unclog it, and next thing you know, like the Blob literally shoots out and grabs him and like pulls him back, like sucks him back down through the pipe. That whole death was like crazy. Like it was just like, oh, that's incredibly disgusting, very graphic. And so then Fran runs out, which was also, I would consider, maybe another main character. It kind of focused on her early. Yeah. And so she's in the phone booth and she's trying to call the sheriff, and next thing you know, the Blobs just surrounded her. And you know, at this point, after you've seen Paul die, you know that like she's a goner, and so just that suffocation, like there's nowhere, she couldn't have gone anywhere. There was no way basically out of that situation, and it crushes the phone booth on her, and that was a pretty intense scene right there. Yeah, and the visuals of that I thought was just awesome, because she makes it into the phone booth, and so you kind of think she's safe, and then it just starts like sliding down around her. That was really good. Pushing in. Yeah. Then you have like, so at this point, you know that the Blob's in the sewer, and the sewer system, and you have these what would you call them, like CDC guys, government workers, whatever they were, military, whatever. Basically they were saying like, no, we're gonna leave the Blob down there to contain it. All the people that are down there are dead, basically. Like it was. And so one of the CDC workers gets attacked. Another one this is all in the sewer. Another one has a freaking rocket launcher with him, and so they're trying to get up the crawl space through whatever the sewer. Yeah, like the manhole. Yep. And trying to get out. They drive a vehicle over after some conversation saying you're not allowed out. You're basically screwed. Yeah. And Brian's like, nope. Grabs this rocket launcher, shoots it straight up. It hits the manhole cover, blows up the vehicle that's sitting on top of it, and they just crawl out, kind of like badasses. You know? It's like, you can't believe you're going to do that to us. But anyway, so I thought that was pretty funny. No one definitely puts Brian in the sewer. Yeah. One of the scenes that I loved, and we'll come back to talking about the scientists and stuff, but one scene that I really loved was in the movie theater when the Blob starts coming out of the projection booth, and so like it turns into strobe lights, and so you've got that giant Blob with its tentacles going everywhere and grabbing people all over, and the lights are flashing on and off, and it's just like pure chaos. That I thought was pulled off really well and was a really, really cool scene. But kind of back to what you were talking about, the
big twist to all this was that the government made that organism and shot it into space, and then it came back down, and it kind of added a little more element to the story, that it's not just this random mysterious alien, it's meant to be a biological weapon. And so the government people were there almost like an additional villain, because they were coming back to contain it, and they really didn't care if anyone in the town died or not. And so they just wanted to keep what was their investment, the blob. And when that lead scientist saw them down in the sewer, and then just immediately ordered his men to close the hatch, and then they rolled the car back and parked it on top of it, that was cold as ice. Right. And that was that made the people from the government as scary as the blob, as far as, because the movie's making you empathize with Brian and the girl, and it's like Meg. Yes, Meg. And so I don't know, just introducing that additional element to it, and thinking who can you trust? And not only do they have to try and escape from the blob, but now they've also got to try and escape from these people that are there trying to contain it and use them, basically as bait. That really, I thought, was a good add to the story.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. I think they called it germ warfare is what they were calling it. But it's also terrifying that if the government were to really do that, because they were talking about doing that to Russia, but the thing doesn't work in the cold. That's the one thing that it can't deal with. Yeah. And that's the one thing that the Russians have on their side. Yeah. So it's anyway, I mean, I know it's not. Anyway, so it's just that was really poor planning. But it definitely, like you're saying, added to this whole, it wasn't just trying to deal with an alien invasion. It was a whole, I mean, I guess it was an alien organism or whatever, but it was just you not only had the bad guys of being the blob, but you also had it of the CDC government workers.
And then I guess at the very end it had that scene with the priest holding that frozen piece of the blob that he'd put in the jar earlier, but it had melted and was moving around and was obviously still alive, and he was saying that the time to release it would be soon, and was doing some kind of big tent revival, end of days preaching type thing. And so that I thought was a really good ending too, because it showed that they hadn't really stopped it, and there was this whole world of opportunity for it to go on and grow again, and presumably be even bigger than it had been to start with. So
he was saying the Lord will give him a sign. Was what he was saying. That made it a little bit even more creepy. But I mean, I think that was the thing I was kind of wanting to say during the facts was, it sets up perfectly for a sequel.
It really does,
But because of it kind of being a box office bomb, that's why they didn't, continue that. But I mean, thinking of Nightmare on Elm Street, the way it ended did not set it up for a sequel, or Friday the 13th, that did not set it up for a sequel, but they still were able to get them out. This one perfectly set you up for a sequel. Who knows?
And I guess I just realized I messed up earlier. Killer Clowns did not kill the people I wanted it to. That one, the main guy that I didn't like, got to live. This one did, though, which was nice by comparison.
Made up for it.
Got rid of Scott, the date raper. It got rid of that guy that was talking in the movie theater, which is the worst form of human behavior. And then it also got rid of that snotty kid in the yellow jacket.
Oh, yeah.
That was an idiot. Man. Through the whole movie, he kept getting his friend in trouble.
Didn't it kill the deputy, too? I think it did.
It got one of the cops. I couldn't tell which one it was, though. But
I got the main sheriff who was going to go on the date, but I thought it killed the second one, but he may have just got shot. But anyway, it definitely took out the people who, which I guess that's another thing. If you're gonna kill someone off, at least kill off a bad killer or a bad person.
I guess the one exception was Paul. I kind of liked him at the beginning, but after that,
that needed to happen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, they did that, and that's what got our attention, why we
That's
continued
true.
watching
Yeah.
the movie.
Very true.
Otherwise, this podcast would have been totally different.
Yeah. I'll give you that.
Yeah.
But there's one thing I feel like we haven't talked nearly enough about with this movie, and that's
Wait, let me think. Dylan's hair.
Brian.
Well, yeah. What was his name? But what's his real name?
Oh, I don't know.
That's Matt Dillon's. Kevin Dillon
Oh, okay.
was the guy who played Brian, and that's the younger brother of Matt Dillon.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. I did not know that. I can kind of see a resemblance now that I think about it.
Yeah.
But anyway, the character's name was Brian, and he was very entertaining for a lot of reasons. One is, as you mentioned, the hair. I feel like if we were doing some kind of like award for worst hair in a movie that we've seen so far, he would win that. But if there was also an award for most glorious hair in a movie that we've seen so far, he might win that too.
Yeah, it was definitely rough, but you also knew like he was about to get shit done.
He was there to do work.
Yeah. I mean, he had the hair for it. You put a bandana in that thing?
Oh, yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah. He could have been singing for any number of 80s
Yeah.
bands.
Heartthrob.
Yeah. Well, and it's also always really entertaining to me to watch an actor who clearly has never smoked play a character that does.
I know.
It was it cracked me
dude.
up through the whole movie.
You see them hold their cigarettes weird and stuff, and it's just like, God dang it.
Well, and they're constantly like, they light it up, they like take one awkward drag, and then they just toss it and run. Yeah. And you're like, why? Yeah. Why did the character need to smoke? Like, this kid is clearly hating every minute of this.
Exactly. Yeah, that's definitely a pet peeve of mine, is seeing people smoke and they hold their cigarettes with like their two fingers just straight out, and like, I don't know.
Yeah. Like, you can tell they're having to think about it really hard. Like, what do I do with this weird burning thing in my hand?
Yeah.
He was also so bad at riding his motorcycle.
Well, yeah, absolutely. But it was so great thinking that this guy, for fun, was just gonna ramp a bridge. Like, I just love that idea that there's some guy out there that's by himself, not doing it for anyone but himself.
Yeah.
And he was fixing to ramp a bridge, and his bike screwed up on him. And
took like 2 puffs of a cigarette, tossed it, and then took off and wrecked his. But he put that motorcycle on the ground, I feel like 8 times in the movie. And I owned motorcycles for, I don't know, 10 years, and I never laid one over. Like,
right.
But at the same time, it was, how often do you see that in a movie, that someone's just like bad at doing a thing? You know what I mean? Like, they're always good at,
it's not like a comedy.
Yeah. It's not like he's like this magician on a motorcycle who is escaping every situation by how well he can ride inexplicably. No, he's terrible at it, just like most people would be when they're scared. So, I don't know. Maybe there's something to say for it. But it was fun to watch.
Yeah. And also, this movie also had, like, so you know your movie pet peeve, one of them is hearing the kissing sound. Mine is people who wear headphones listening to loud music when, like, it's just a normal conversation kind of thing. Yeah. Like, the kid in the yellow jacket that wore his headphones just immediately pissed me off.
Oh, yeah.
Just like, why would you do that? Like, you're not cool. You can't hear your friend. Like,
he was wearing them in the movie theater. I just wanted to slap him.
It's like, what the hell is going on here? And then he died, and I was like, okay.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, for me, that kid wearing those headphones was about the same that I feel about people that have, like, always wear the Bluetooth headset. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, they just never take it off. Ugh. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know, man.
We've covered a lot of territory today.
We did.
I think this is a fitting start to season 5.
Yeah, it's definitely a good start.
And I mean, we're just gonna keep right on plowing. We're just gonna be back with another episode next week and go from there.
Yeah, keep up the recommendations.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely enjoy those where we don't have to put work into thinking of what we want to do next.
Yep, that's good. And are you gonna keep putting stuff on YouTube?
Yep, I'm gonna kind of be selective. I'm just gonna start putting out some past episodes, but I'm not putting we're gonna have a weekly podcast out there.
Cool.
On YouTube. So
nice.
It might be the current episode unless I just didn't like the movie, or it might not be. Or if it's relevant again, if The Haunting of Hill House becomes relevant again, then I'll probably put those out there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're here to gain a fan base, so try to be smart about it.
I like it. Thanks for listening, and we will talk to you next week.
Smell you later.
And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com, or feel free to comment on or message our Facebook page. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening.